Hello, Hellions! Welcome back to episode 5B. Last time, if you recall, we focused on the transition from Proto-Indo-European to Proto-Germanic, and we learned a set of sound shifts that occurred between the unshifted languages, Latin and Greek, which preserved some original consonant sounds from the Proto-language, and corresponding sounds in Germanic languages, which show up in languages like the one I'm speaking right now, and its ancestor Old and Middle English, German, and Dutch, and Danish, and Norwegian, and the Scandinavian languages. Well, today is a rather big pivot in the course. We are going to move from a more technical portion of the course, the more scientific portion of the course, to a more literary portion of the course. But we're still going to use a lot of those tools that we learned before in IPA and in phonetics and articulatory phonetics. So today's episode is called Caedmon's Hymn and the Beginning of English Literature. If you recall, last time we talked about the theoretical first word of English being spoken when those Angles and Saxons, the mercenaries, got off their boats on the British Islands, and what had been a Germanic language was suddenly English, or at least that's how we designate it, because that's where English split off from Germanic. Well, today we're going to talk about the beginning of English literature, and for that we're going to learn Caedmon's Hymn. We're actually going to spend a lot of time on Caedmon's Hymn in the next few lectures. But first, a tidbit and a bit of my own history. Go back to 1991, which you may or may not be able to be in your life. You might not have been alive yet, but Charles, that's Charles, and I were sophomores. We were math majors and physics majors and best friends in college, roommates, and even though we were both going to be mathematicians, I was going to be a nuclear physicist and smash particles together, we decided that we had a hole in our schedule and we were going to take Old English. I think it might have been Charles's suggestion. And so we took Old English class from that guy there, Hans Arsleff. And if he just looked like he had just, gotten off of, of a Norwegian sloop or seagoing whale vessel hunting Moby Dick, I mean, his name is Arsleff, and we called him Arsleff, the pirate. But boy, did he ever know his Old English. And so we learned the Old English language from Hans Arsleff. We studied it like it was a foreign language. And as we were studying it, the very first evening before class, we had the textbook, Bright's Grammar of Old English, green over there on my shelf. We're flipping through the kind of glossary at the end, and we're looking at each other and saying, there are kind of a lot of words in Old English for killing stuff. And so we started collecting all the words for ways to kill stuff that this warlike Germanic people, the Angles and Saxons, had in their language, and our favorite was undoubtedly begrindan, a verb. The an suffix means it's an infinitive verb. Begrindan, be as a prefix, you see the root is to grind. It has several meanings: to polish, that's nice, I assume they polish their armor; to deprive or rob, okay, like to, this is a grind, you get ground out of your stuff; but best of all, to kill by grinding. I was hooked. I believe, in fact, you can trace my calling in life to that moment. I didn't end up majoring in math. I ended up majoring in medieval languages and literatures, and it all began with begrindan. So in case you have an occasion to, I don't know, kill someone by grinding them, you've got a verb for that. That's Charles and me, by the way, at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. We'd like to take the train into New York City. And I'm ashamed to say that we went through all of the Museum of Modern Art making fun of stuff, including that goat statue. What's Charles been up to? He worked for the Department of Defense for a while. He's written several books, including Zero, the Biography of a Dangerous Idea. I found out that's used at Northwestern here in one of their math classes. And one student, I found that out in college writing, and I was asking the roll question of the day, what's your favorite book right now? And someone said, Zero, the Biography of a Dangerous Idea. And I said, ha! Guess what? That was written by my college roommate. He's written another book on virtual unreality, another book on the what passes for mathematical argument and evidence in journalism and popular culture, the dark arts of mathematical deception, proofiness, modeled after truthiness by Colbert. And he's written about 4 more books, too. So he went on with the math. My particles didn't get smashed, but I went the way of Begrindan. So, the question, where did English literature begin? And for that, we've got to go to a text by a guy named Bede. He was so liked that he's always referred to as the Venerable Bede, like the Honorable or Venerated Bede. And he wrote a text in AD 731. Remember your dates. Where are we in history? Those Ostrogoths, Visigoths, and Vandals were sacking the Roman Empire in numbers beginning with 4, the 400s. Rome falls. Mercenaries are invited in 449. Anglo-Saxon England is what's happening politically. Linguistically, it's Old English. Why does English literature then wait a couple of centuries from the 400s to the 700s to begin? It's because of literacy. When England was Christianized in 597, great date to write down, by the way, 597, an emissary from Pope Gregory came and brought Christianity to the Angles and Saxons. This is so common throughout the Middle Ages, throughout world history, in fact, when Christianity comes to an undeveloped people, it brings literacy with it. Why? Because Christians are people of the book. Our authority or guide for life is a book. To know that book, at least the priests have to be literate, and often language and even the written form of a language comes to a people with Christianity. So Bede, in fact, is well after 597, 731, and he's writing a history of the English people, Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Aglorum. In fact, an ecclesiastical history of the people of the Angles. In other words, ecclesiastical or church history of the English people, a spiritual, a Christian history of the English people. The text is in Latin, you've got it right there, but at one point, Bede switches from his Latin, which was the common language of the ancient world. You'd go from region to region, languages would change, but educated new people knew Latin. So he switches from the kind of Latin of the educated scholar of the history to Anglo-Saxon. And that bit he inserts in Anglo-Saxon, you can even see the new right there in the beginning. New is the word now, and the beginning of the long S in shul, shall, that's the same long S as we have in IPA for the sh sound, now shall. That is the beginning of literary Old English. And as in almost all societies, literature begins with poetry. So, what's the story of how this first bit of English literature came to exist? It's the story of a guy named Caedmon. Let's hear what Bede has to say. The setting is a monastery. There's a brother in the monastery who received a divine gift. So he's telling this is a gift from God, in that he was able to make songs. What kind of songs? Religious songs, which pertain to religion and virtue. So that whatever he learned from scholars, after a little while, he could bring forth in poetic language adorned with the greatest sweetness and inspiration, and well made in the English language. That last bit means there was poetry going on before this, a long tradition, but it was oral poetry. In fact, it was Germanic poetry. It often had to do with wars and the Germanic gods, and it had rules, and the poetry did, and had form, but it didn't get written down, English poetry, Germanic English poetry, until Caedmon does. And when it gets written down, the first thing to get written down is not about Germanic gods and warfare, it's about Christianity. Beowulf, by the way, is the one epic we have giving us an example of what poetry in the English language looked like, probably before Caedmon. So we're told that by his poem songs, people were kindled to disdain of the world, that means to love heaven, and likewise many others after him endeavored to compose pious songs. So Caedmon started a tradition of religious poetry in English, but none so in like manner to him, because he had learned it not from men, but he was divinely aided by God. And he could never make any lying songs. That's the ancient idea that, oh, literature is just lying. No, but only those which pertain to piety. Here's the story, and it's a great story. I want you to learn. He'd had a worldly life until he was old. Caedmon's old, and he had never learned any songs. Okay, he's not a scop, S-C-O-P. That's the Anglo-Saxon word for bard, singer. And consequently, he had something like social anxiety, because they would sit around at a gathering, at a drinking gathering in this case, like at a hall, and they would not only pass the beer, or mead rather, they would pass the harp. And instead of streaming Netflix, everyone would sing one of these songs of the people with a harp. And when he saw the harp nearing him, like the microphone approaching, he arose for shame from the feast and went home to his house. And he did this one time. He left the banquet hall and went to the animal stables. And the herd had been assigned to him that night. He lies down and he falls asleep. And then some man stood by him. This is how Bede tells the story of his inspiration. And the man in his dream says, "Caedmon, sing me something." Ha, this is the definition of irony, right? And he says, hello? I do not know how to sing, and for that reason I just went out from the feast and went thither, because I don't know how to sing at all. And again the man says, who was speaking with him, "Nevertheless, you must sing." And he's, all right, okay, what do I got to sing? And he says, "Sing me Frumschaft." Sing to me of the first creation. When he received this answer, he began immediately to sing in praise of God. So there's a kind of miraculous beginning to English poetry. And what he sings is, well, it's not this. That's actually just a statue to Caedmon. You see his name up there with the ash. There he is with his harp, the harp being handed to him by an angel or God, to the glory of God in memory of Caedmon, the father of English sacred song. So what did he sing? He sang this. Now, just a couple notes before we walk through this. We're going to get really familiar with this text. I first studied it when I took 2 semesters of Old English at Vanderbilt with Janet Erickson, good old Janet Erickson. Semester 1 was kind of the grammar and vocabulary of Old English. Semester 2 was Beowulf. We translated Beowulf. The whole thing, you know, from the beginning to the end, whole semester. Oh, good times. But we're going to look at Caedmon's hymn. I should point out, by the way, capital letters, that's me adding to the text. That's not in there. They didn't do capital letters. Also, punctuation, didn't have it. They got along fine without semicolons, commas, dashes, apostrophes. That's all added. It's editorial. Also, you'll notice it's broken up into half lines, into lines and half lines. That also, if you recall the image I showed you of the manuscript, not in the original. That's editorial. This was written on manuscript, on vellum, which is like scraped animal skin. You think a sheet of, you know, like copier paper is expensive? Try scraping out a sheet and curing a sheet of like animal leather and writing on it. You use the whole thing. You don't leave blank spaces. But we can tell, using certain features of the poetry, that it had not only lines, but a sort of caesura, like a seizure, a break in the middle of the line, and also that it has a certain form that allows us to break it up like this, which is how they would have conceived it in their mind, though they wrote it straight out linearly, no caps, no punctuation, no spaces on the actual manuscript. So we're going to spend a lot of time with this text. I'm actually going to ask you to learn it. It only takes about 50 seconds to say. So start practicing every day. And in a minute, I'll say it out loud and ask you to repeat after me. We're going to use this text to learn cultural things about the Anglo-Saxons. We're going to learn about their concept of God from this text. We're going to learn how to pronounce Old English from this text. And we are going to learn the form of Old English poetry. Notice it's poetry, but there's no iambic pentameter here. That's a French form. We don't have that yet. There's also no rhyme, but it has a form. I'll let you try and intuit what that is. We're going to do all those things just from this text. So I'll say a half line. You repeat it after me. Nu shulon herian. Use your ears, not your eyes. Heovon riches weard. I assume you're repeating after me. Meotodas meachta. And his mod je thank. Weorg wulder fader. Swahe wundra je was. Eche drichten or onstealda. He erest sheop. Eordan bearnum. Heovon to hrova. Hali schippend. Thamidanjard. Mon kunis weard. Eche drichten. After Theoda. Firum foldan. Freya almichti. Now let me just point out that you probably think that sounds like gibberish. There are only a few words on here that you know. Hey, there's and, which has survived 1,500 years, 1,300 years without changing. There's his, and you might even be able to see the word almighty there, and after there, and man there. But there are a lot of words in here like eche drichten, which is repeated, which you just do not know. Old English has to be learned as a foreign language because 1,500 years ago, our language was a foreign language to us. Language changes. Insert story. Fast forward to 1998, and I want you to meet the winner of the 1998 Marcus Kinsack Award for Best Ever Conversation Topic with the Worst Ever Timing. So, my wife is pregnant. I've just finished graduate school. We're getting ready to move to Orange City, Iowa, and it's time for the baby to come. And our gynecologist, our OB, is Dr. Tribue, right there. And he's an educated man. He's at Vanderbilt. And my wife has a long, difficult labor. I believe it took about a month and a half, in my memory. And we are at that point where she's pushing, and my son's head is crowning. Now, I don't know if any of you have observed births. I don't know if any of you have children. But when you know that your spouse is pregnant, or if you are pregnant, the difference between that and actually seeing your child, you think you're prepared, you're not. It's shocking. Seeing your child like shreds the fabric of space and time. You click back a generation, life becomes unreal, you are no longer the center of your own universe. It's a stunning, overwhelming, sublime moment. So Marcus is crowning, if you don't know what that means, ask someone, in my wife, and I'm looking at the head of my child. I'm in raptures. And Dr. Anthony Tribue, who has done this, 10,000 times, looks over at me, new dad, and says, "So, Michael, you're a medievalist, right? We talked about that. Have you ever read Bede? I really love Bede and the story of Caedmon." And I'm like, what? Bede? Yeah, Caedmon. Love Caedmon. Caedmon's great. And I'm looking back at my child, and my wife is in, terrible pain. And he's like, "And what I really like about Bede," I'm like, yeah, Bede. I'm like, wow. Amazing, ability to converse on a variety of topics, and really, really bad timing. Okay, back to the rest of today's lesson is about the names of God in Caedmon's hymn. There are a number of them here. We're going to go through each one. At this point, please print out this sheet because we're going to start taking notes on it. Take your notes kind of compact because we're going to have a lot of layers of notes. You might even use different colors. Today, the names of God in Caedmon's hymn. Here's the idea. So Caedmon, we still have a Germanic people. They still have kind of a Beowulf ethic going. We fight monsters and dragons and enemies. We drink mead and we sing about our ancient warlike heroes. Oh, and I guess we're supposed to be Christians now. So Caedmon not only repurposes Anglo-Saxon poetic form to talk about God, the Christian God, he's also got to find a vocabulary. He's got to become a kind of translator, a cultural translator, to bring the ideas of Christianity to a people with a Germanic warlike mindset, a tribal, illiterate people. So how's he going to describe concepts like, grace or atonement in a language that might not have those words? How's he going to describe God? So let's walk through and I'll pause on the names of God. First, and I'll tell you what the poem means. This is on your handout. Nu shulan herian, now shall we praise, here's the first name in green, Heovon rich is weard. Heovon, the F makes a V sound, is heaven. Rich is cognate with our word rich. It's also, it looks like rice, but it's reach. That's a T long S, ch, affricate. Reach is cognate with German Reich. Hitler had one, the third one. So Heaven Reach is the heaven empire, or the heaven kingdom. Compound word. Anglo-Saxons love to compound words. The next word is weard. It's cognate with our word warden, and it basically means guardian. So now shall we praise the heaven kingdom's guardian. That's the first way they think about God, the guardian of the heaven empire. Interesting, right? We now name God again, like a second direct object. Meotodes meachta. The first word is possessive. See the es? We shall also praise the measurer's might. Meachta is might. The word measurer. Meotod is the root. Meotod sounds like a word method. It's also cognate with the word measure. And the word for it I want you to remember is measurer, or like the methodical measure. Now, instead of God being the guardian of the heaven empire, God is the measurer. How? We're singing creation. It's like God took out his tape measure and said, okay, Earth will be this big, and the firmament will be this big, and Pluto, which will be a planet, then not a planet, then maybe a planet again, will be this big. He's the measurer of all things. So we shall praise the Heaven reaches weird, Meotodes Machta, and also praise his Mod Yathank. Mod is our word mood, but for them it's like mind, and thunk with, hey, see the thorn, like NIPA, makes a TH sound. Thunk is our word thought, like think. His mood thinks. So we shall praise like his works, his measuring, and the mighty measurer, and we shall also praise the thoughts of his mind. Here's some more things we're praising. Werk wulder fader. The work, and this is also genitive or possessive, of the. Wulder is wonder, wondrous, amazing. Fader is our word father. So I have a father, you have or have had a father. They can be good or bad, but God is a wondrous father. Right? And we shall praise God, swahe wundre Yahwas, skip the next bit, or onstealda. Swa is as he, wundre Yahwas, that's each of wonders. Wonders is plural possessive. As he each of wonders, or means beginning. It's like air this, German ur. As he onstealda, and that's a verb meaning established or set up or created. So we'll praise God with these names as he, for each of wonders, the beginning established. That's creation. He created the beginning of all the wonders we see in creation. There's an appositive there stuck in, H.A. Drichten, where we pause just to name God again. As he each of wonders, oh, by the way, he's H.A. Drichten. This is a great phrase. Notice it's repeated down below. We'll talk more about that later. Eche means eternal. Drichten, and it has a sound in the middle. Drichten means a warlord, chieftain. The people Caedmon was writing to would have had a Drichten, but their Drichten would have been a human Drichten, a mortal Drichten. In fact, I forget the exact numbers, but life expectancy for Anglo-Saxons was low. Men and women both died on average in their 30s. Men from battle, and women basically, put out children until they died in childbirth, to oversimplify. But God is not that kind of Drichten who dies at 37. He's an Eche Drichten, an eternal tribal chieftain. Got it? So now a second sentence. He erst sheop. He, erst is like erstwhile. He first. Sheop is cognate with the word shaped. The SC makes an SH sound. So write, your long SH sound. He first shaped eorthan bearnum. This is a little complicated. Bearnum, bearn is the root. It means son, sons. It's plural. And it's dative plural. From that, you need to know it means for. There's a case in the um ending which says it's for them, like indirect object, for the sons. And then eorthan is of earth. So that line says he first shaped for the sons of earth, or literally of earth for the sons. So what did he shape for the sons of earth? Presumably also the daughters. Heovon to hrova. Both F's are V's. He first shaped heaven, which they would have imagined as like a dome. You could go up to it and go plink, the firmament. He first shaped the sky or the heaven as a what? To be a hrova, to be a roof. He first made us a roof, like to keep the waters from raining on us. He first gave us a roof. And then we pause to name him again. Hali. You don't pronounce the G, it's just a yes sound. Hali Schupend. Schupend there is actually related to the verb in the last line, erst sheop. Here he's Schupend, shaper or maker. Just a regular maker? No, a Hali Schupend, a holy shaper, a holy maker. And then a third sentence. It starts with a direct object. Tha midanyard. That means the middle yard. Tolkien, anyone? Where do we live? Or where do the hobbits and dwarves and elves and ents live? Middle Earth? That comes straight out of this. The middle yard, sort of between the waters or between heaven and hell. We're on the middle yard of creation, the earth. We pause to name God again. Monkin is Weard. Notice we've repeated Weard from the first line, guardian. But are now we the guardian of heaven? No, now we're the guardian of Monkin, mankind. See, now God makes us, and now he's our guardian too. We pause again to call him H.A. Drishtin again, which sounds like some unnecessary repetition, but there's a very good reason for it. And then we continue. After, that means afterwards. Next, Theoda. So he's created the beginning of all wonders. Heaven is a roof. After Theoda, afterwards adorned, Firum Foldan, for the children of earth. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Afterwards adorned the earth with people. And I want to concentrate on this last line. We get another Almichti, and we call God Freya. Now, Freya was a German god, a Norse, a Nordic god. You hear about Freya in like the Ring, Wagner's Ring cycle, the Norse sagas. It's also the god that gives us, remember our days of our week are named after gods. What day is named after this Norse god? Wednesday. No, Friday. Freya's day. Now here's the cool thing. Freya is not a god. Freya is a goddess. In fact, she's the goddess of fertility. So we just did some gender bending stuff. Why? Fertility, I'd say. So God's a warden, that's a kind of masculine thing, a guardian, and he's an artist, a shaper, and in the end he's procreative. He is, in a sense, life-giving, maternal. But he's an almighty mother, just like he's a wondrous father. That's the way Caedmon chose to represent the Christian God to his Anglo-Saxon audience. Who are these people? I don't know if you listen to Christian music, contemporary music. A couple years ago, they were pretty famous. Caedmon's Call. They actually call it Caedmon's Call. That's the group. There's some of their albums. If you ever run into them, you could say, oh, I know about that. The Call of Caedmon to sing Caedmon's hymn. I know those people. That's Caedmon's Call. By the way, here's a link to someone else reading Caedmon, Jess Bessinger, famous Anglo-Saxonist. and Bessinger reads the poem aloud to music and in a kind of melodic way, which is a reconstruction of how it might have sounded originally. There's a link there, and you'll notice there's actually one difference in Bessinger's line. He sings Ilde Bearnum instead of Eorthen Bearnum. Hey, this is a time before like print editions. It was just from a different manuscript. So welcome to medieval textual studies and Caedmon's